Hello and welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation with a changemaker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Mike Werner, lead for the circular economy at Google, joins us today to discuss the tech giant's sustainability commitments and efforts to create a circular approach to its products and other assets. Google is, and I quote, constantly looking for new ways to build projects, design out waste and pollution, and keep materials and resources in use for as long as possible. We're committed to maximizing our reuse of finite resources across our operations, products, and supply chains while empowering others to do the same, unquote. There's a lot to unpack in that statement, and we'll try to do more than scratch the surface today. But before we bring Mike on, here are a few of Google's accomplishments to date. In 2007, Google achieved carbon neutrality using carbon offsets in its operations, which means that anytime you use Google to Google something, the search itself is carbon neutral. In 2017, Google had matched its entire annual electricity consumption with renewable energy credits, offsetting its use of fossil fuel-based electricity across all of its operations. Their 2030 goal is to achieve carbon-free operations, including for all of its supplier relationships and consumer electronics, such as the Pixel phone and Nest thermostat. Google currently diverts 78% of its data center waste and 64% of its office waste from landfills and refurbishes 27% of the server components for use in its new server configurations. Google has also invested $3.3 billion in renewable energy projects to support its operations, which will eliminate the need for use of offsets in the future. And the company has built over 18 million square feet of LEED-certified office space and provides 4,000 EV charging stations at its North American operations. There's a lot to unpack, as I said, and its progress on all of these stated goals are published in its 2022 sustainability report. You can learn more about Google's sustainability and circular economy programs at sustainability.google.com. Welcome to the show, Mike. How are you doing today?
Mitch, I'm doing wonderful. It is cold and rainy in California today, but we need the water. It is a pleasure and honor to be here with you on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, and I'm glad you're getting some water. Unfortunately, it's snowing here in the Seattle area, so I don't necessarily share your passion for this form of water. But so I want to start off by asking, why is Google so dedicated to sustainability? Were Larry Page and Sergey Brin committed to sustainability when they started the company? I don't remember them talking about it. And if not, what was the catalyst for all of this activity?
Yes, great question. The sustainability has been core to our founding, with Larry and Sergey both being really passionate about it, perhaps quietly so. And while I was not at the company in 1998, I've heard lots of stories of their involvement in sustainability and passion for sustainability. And today they continue to quietly fund sustainability through their own foundations. Mm-hmm. I think one of the most memorable stories for me is hearing folks recount Larry walking around the office with a device to measure indoor air quality. And you might remember that this is around the time of sick building syndrome and the beginnings of the LEED rating system, for buildings in the mid 90s or so. So, Google then became the first major company to be carbon neutral in 2007 as a tangible action toward climate change. And there were many other efforts that we undertook across the business, including the built environment, and it's snowballed since then. I wish I could tell you the exact catalyst, but again, there aren't that many people at the company who were around at the founding today.
Well, another facet of that is, how did they introduce you to these priorities when you joined? Because this is really one of the critical challenges for any company, is to get people aligned with these goals. What did they tell you about this?
Yeah, well, I first learned about sustainability when I joined in 2017 as a new Googler in our new employee orientation. And so I heard a lot about things that were happening in our data centers with renewable energy and our workplaces, LEED certified spaces and waste. But I also came in at a time where I was hired to build environmental programs in our consumer hardware division, which was barely 1 year old and part of a pivotal shift that Google took to taking more a strategy of more vertical integration around design and manufacture of hardware.
That creates a lot of interesting opportunities in terms of optimization because you're in control of every step. Let's talk about the definition of operational carbon neutrality. You are offsetting all of the impacts of a search right now, but you have goals of being 100% carbon free by 2030. What will that mean?
Well, whether someone's using Google at home or as part of an organization running Google Cloud or Google Workspace, all products in our cloud are carbon neutral. And so that means that the operational greenhouse gas emissions associated with running workloads on our infrastructure have been reduced through procurement of renewable energy. Mm-hmm. And any residual emissions have been compensated with high quality carbon credits. And to achieve this, we have a pretty straightforward 3-part strategy to neutralize the operational carbon footprint. First is reduce energy consumption by maximizing efficiency. So the greenest electricity is the electricity you don't use. Second, we match 100% of the electricity consumption of our operations with purchases of renewable energy. And then third, we purchase high quality carbon offsets for emissions that we could not reduce directly. All 3 strategies are still relevant today, but we've obviously evolved our strategy. In 2019, we announced the pursuit of operating our company on 24/7 carbon-free energy by 2030. Mm-hmm. And last year, we elevated our commitment to becoming net zero by 2030 across scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Empowering our company on 100% clean carbon-free energy is at the heart of our net zero strategy.
Now, obviously, renewable energy plays a critically important role in all of this. And you all have already built about 6 gigawatts of renewable capacity. You're part of the Clean Energy Buyers Alliance, which includes General Motors, Microsoft, Walmart, and others that are dedicated to an incredibly aggressive goal of 90% renewable generation capacity by 2030. So based on your experience in all of these projects, do you think the world as a whole can get to a renewable infrastructure by 2040 or 2050?
Yeah, first, I want to recognize and honor the amazing talent within the company that are driving toward these goals and across the sector and industry, everybody that is part of these commitments in getting business to purchase more renewable energy and to build capacity. It is amazing to see this happen. To answer your question directly, personally, I'm cautiously optimistic. Okay. Why is that? So some good news. This year, we've seen major steps forward on climate policy in the US, Europe, and other regions. And I and many of us at Google are excited about the potential of new policy measures and corporate commitments, as I had mentioned, that will help us reach historic emissions reductions over the next decade. I think we continue to see year-over-year growth of renewables and costs plummeting. That's good news. And we've also seen major corporates engage in climate action in ways that we haven't seen since the modern sustainability movement started. And Mitch, you know this better than I do, certainly. But this is an extremely important ingredient in what every sustainability professional has been waiting for. But there's some concerning news. WRI published their State of Climate Action 2022 report, and that summarized just how far off we are globally from achieving the Paris Agreement. In fact, 0 of 40 indicators of action needed by 2030 and 2050 are on track to deliver the systems-wide transformations across things like power, buildings, industry, transport, food, agriculture, and so on. Second, nature loss is at unprecedented levels, and every ecosystem, every indicator species, every biome is impacted, and many are at critically low levels. And we need nature to achieve a net zero future because nature sequesters carbon. And it provides a whole host of amazing other benefits, creating oxygen, fixing nitrogen, creating microclimates, stabilizing regions, and so on. And there's so much work needed to address nature and biodiversity loss, and it directly impacts our ability to achieve net zero globally. Third, if I may add one more, which I think is really important, is that the green energy transition is a metals transition. Mm-hmm. So being bullish on renewable energy means being bullish on mining, and that comes with a whole host of other concerns. The IEA has reported that we need 600% more critical minerals in the economy by 2040 to meet the commitments under the Paris Agreement by 2050. And this is going to create a lot of pain in the short term and potentially long term, price and supply shock issues, because demand is set to outstrip supply in the next 3 to 4 years for copper, lithium, cobalt, among others.
So one of the things that Google is uniquely placed to do as the organizer of the world's information is to help everybody see into these things that we have long described as externalities, stuff that doesn't matter. But it turns out it matters a lot. Can you work with your customers, corporate customers in particular, to begin to help them understand their total environmental impact the way that you've begun to, and also potentially monetize their progress?
Yes, and we are starting that and have lots of investments in this place, in this area, in this space in particular. Many of the world's biggest brands are working with us to operate more sustainably. And so, for example, through Google Cloud, we have been helping customers minimize environmental impact. So this summer, we started sharing our 24/7 carbon-free energy insights with our cloud customers through a new pilot program. We've announced the latest version of our Carbon Sense suite to help Google Cloud customers accurately report the carbon emissions associated with their cloud usage and storage. We are engaging our users with eco-friendly routing in Google Maps, so you can choose a route that's optimized for lower fuel consumption to save both money and carbon emissions. We have Earth Engine and Global Forest Watch. Lots of examples of where we are using the power of tools and technology to help people make better decisions, whether you're a policymaker or you're a brand customer that is trying to make your supply chain better or your business more sustainable.
How much can the technology industry reduce its energy requirements? Is it important that we continue or accelerate that rate of efficiency improvement in order to achieve the goals that you're talking about?
When you start thinking about the efficient material efficiency and use phase efficiency, we're clearly trying to drive higher use phase efficiency, whether it is powering our data centers or a consumer electronic device in the hands of our users. There's been a significant amount of work to try to dematerialize everything from packaging to the amount of raw materials going into our devices, and that those are critical levers, not just because of sustainability, but it's also good business. Maybe there's something there that we might explore a little bit deeper, but I'm struggling.
Well, let's talk about the reuse of materials, particularly
Sure.
recycling. And in fact, Google and Earth911 do a little bit of work together. You hit our database to answer questions for people, so we think about this a lot. Capturing more of the material that you have produced in the past, phones, thermostats, but a wide variety of things. Are you making investments to create a truly closed circular economy in your own materials in order to achieve that kind of efficiency?
Great question. And by closed loop recycling, do you mean Google products being recycled and made back into Google products?
That's the most literal interpretation. And it's something that we see with large tech companies. They tend to just want to buy scrap from somebody else rather than thinking in terms of a closed loop. So is that a viable way to think about this? Or should we just have a more general recycling system?
I think we need both.
Okay.
So closed loop recycling of products is an important strategy and one that we've experimented with, but it comes with a lot of barriers and challenges.
Like what?
First, networks need to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to first recognize that today we have a global distribution network that is wired to move products from production through and into the hands of consumers. Those same supply chains and networks do not operate in reverse. So achieving a closed loop recycling process for consumer hardware products, for example, means that we need new networks. Yeah. And this is not unique to us. This is true for every consumer electronics company. The second barrier among many is that we need to overcome some of the aspects of consumer engagement. And we've published some research into consumer barriers into electronics recycling. And there are both practical and psychological barriers to getting e-waste out of drawers, out of closets, and into the recycling stream. With that being said, we have looked at ways of doing closed loop recycling of plastics and some other materials directly from our products, but we are unfortunately not at a scale, not at a place where it makes sense. Alternatively, we are keenly interested in chemical recycling technologies of existing materials flowing through recycling systems. And these are really attractive because there's an opportunity of taking post-consumer plastic waste and producing new plastics that are 100% recycled content with virgin-like material properties. You can't achieve this reliably through mechanical recycling value chains. But I do have a story for you of a closed-loop example from our data centers, where we partnered with Seagate and worked to reuse magnet assemblies from more than 6,000 hard drives and remanufacture them into new hard drives. And it was extremely technically challenging because hard drives are an amazing, incredible feat of engineering. And you cannot let a speck of dust attach onto the magnet or you render it completely useless. Mm-hmm. And in order to complete our pilot, we could not remove hard drives from our data center because they contain sensitive information on them. So we had to build a clean room on site dedicated to magnet disassembly, carefully place them in dust-free packaging, and return them to Seagate, where they took those magnet assemblies and installed them back into new hard drives. However, hard drives are continually evolving, and that results in new magnet designs every few years. So the pilot was a success, but it's difficult to continue to do this. Yeah. Cost effectively, and so it's something that we're still learning from.
But based on that learning, though, do you see an opportunity in, for instance, greater standardization of componentry, which is why the industry grew in the first place? Is that you could take a PCI card and plug it in here. There were things called SCSI cards back then. We grew up using standardized stuff and evolving that. It suggests that we need very specialized closed loops in the long run in order to address these more complicated technologies. But can Google and all the large companies you're partnering with agree on using standard materials so that they are more easily recyclable?
That's a really great question, and something that I could speculate on. For example, There are a lot of common parts that do exist, things like resistors and MOSFETs and other so-called off-the-shelf components that manufacturers use. There's something quite magical to creating a product with an amazing experience that is fully integrated, and that requires a custom solution often. Right. Now, the materials portfolio at hand, things like aluminum and certain types of plastics, et cetera, are not necessarily unique, but the way in which these manufacturers combine them does make parts not interchangeable readily across the whole ecosystem. And I think this is something that we're seeing playing out right now with USB-C and charging ports, and the desire to standardize across Europe, for example, onto USB-C charging. And that's going to be, I think, a really important test case for a really important moment for us to think through standardization. But it doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of other components across the consumer electronics or hyperscale data center hardware portfolio.
Fair enough. The thing is that we're talking about an increasingly complex economy that we need to simplify in such a way that we can reuse it. Now, we just happen to have had Gary Cooper Jr., who is the CEO of Repley.
He's amazing.
And you're on the board there. I just want to call that out so we get that in front of people. He has created a platform for regional circular economies. As you look at what Repley's doing, have you thought about how to plan what Google purchases so that it can be recycled or reused efficiently? And do you look at those things now as having future value that you would have written off before?
Clearly, yes, we have. And we published a white paper a couple of years ago on the role of deconstruction of commercial buildings, deconstruction and reuse of commercial buildings, and looking at how do we set up regional networks of material hubs, of fixtures and other equipment that might get salvaged for reuse and integrated into new buildings. And in fact, our most recent building projects in the Bay Area, Charleston East and Bayview, integrate salvaged materials from older buildings that were deconstructed, and materials like tiles, backsplash, carpeting, and ceiling tiles, and other materials are featured throughout the building. that do capture local material use and then redeployed in a new building. And I think what Gary and his team are doing is incredible, in a beacon of hope of a technology solution for future markets and in other sectors, to capture materials locally, highlight them, make them visible, not just internally as a business, but externally to a lot of other companies, and be able to connect those people in the marketplace to be able to reuse a lot of embodied carbon that already exists in the world, that we do not need to be spending new carbon to be making a lot of new stuff. We ought to be capturing the value of what's already out there.
Which implies that we need to better catalog everything that we have. Does Google look at its own assets as a resource rather than just a cost that they're going to throw away at the end of the day?
We do. And as I had mentioned, our work with Gary and his team, for example, it is public that we use their platform and are continuing to find ways of recapturing value out of existing resources, no doubt. And as you can appreciate, this is a long-term journey and a marathon, because every company is struggling with what do we have deployed across our building fleet, across our operations, and how do we reuse that, recapture that, and put that back out into the secondary market.
And once that information's out there, interesting things can happen. We're going to find out what that might be as we work through history. We'll see. This is a great place to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. We're back to continue the conversation with Google's circular economy leader, Mike Werner. So, Mike, you all have invested to create circular economy accelerator programs to help startups solve circular challenges. I'm wondering, how did the program get started? What's involved? And what kinds of key gaps are those programs seeking to fill with successful startups?
Yeah, last month we announced our first circular economy accelerator, building on incredible success of two previous accelerators focused on climate change. And so the circular economy accelerator is going to bring the best of Google's programs, products, people, and our technology to startups and NGOs that are working on very specifically circular economy related things, with an aim of realizing a future without waste. We know that waste is an enormous issue. Just in the United States, 42 million tons of plastic waste in 2016, and 90% of all riverborne plastic in the ocean comes from just 10 rivers, 8 of which are in Asia Pacific. And so the program has an open call for applications for startups and NGOs headquartered in APAC in North America. And then after completing an inaugural program, we hope to expand this to other markets, including EMEA. But each company and organization that's selected to join the accelerator are going to receive a number of benefits, and we're really aimed at trying to address technology solutions aimed at the circular economy. So those are some of the key gaps that we see.
Amongst the technologies and information technologies, what do you think are key to solving problems like the low e-waste recycling rate that we face? It's overall 15 to 17% of all e-waste gets recycled. The rest is ending up in landfills. Google surfaces information. How do you tell the stories through these kinds of programs that activate people to take the actions that you said earlier are often blocked by emotional and information challenges?
I want to tease out a couple of things. One is the accelerator is really focused in on AI and ML type solutions, technology solutions, data challenge solutions, of which achieving e-waste recycling is certainly a data issue. And if we want to take a specific look at how would we increase e-waste recycling rates and the reuse and reprocessing of materials, I think we really need to understand the systems nature of the problem. And you had mentioned some of the recycling features that we have in Maps. I think I want to highlight a couple of things because therein lie solutions, technology solutions. First, curbside and drop-off recycling is an inelastic market. And that's because consumers are not active participants in pricing and demand signals of recycled materials. This is just as true for e-waste as it is for PET bottles. So if the spot price for recycled PET goes up 30%, that does not result in a 30% increase in supply flowing into recycling value chains by consumers. Second, there's a vast set of barriers to getting consumers to releasing electronics into the recycling ecosystem. And we published a great paper on this at sustainability.google/reports, where we dove into these drivers surrounding electronics, why electronics are lurking and hibernating in people's homes. And that includes awareness to recycling options in their communities, generally low awareness, compensation expectations. Often we want money or some piece of value, remuneration for participating and giving up our devices. Nostalgia, we really love these things. We've got fond memories of them. Data security, we're really worried about what's going to happen to our data when we give this thing up. There's often low convenience to be able to recycle. I have to drive 20 minutes or it's not, there's no local option, and there are others. So these are some of the examples, but I would say that we also don't have the right technologies to convert complex electronics back into usable raw materials. And so we need to evolve from shredding into more sophisticated approaches to material recovery that makes it easier, more attractive, and less expensive than primary extraction. So I think there are a few things that we can do in examples of where we have intervened. Engaging consumers on the circular economy journey in meaningful ways that addresses some of the barrier stack that I mentioned. So you have been involved for a long time in surfacing recycling drop-off locations, and we were able to you also appreciate the complexities in keeping that data fresh and live and relevant, and you're laughing.
Complexities is putting it mildly.
Enormously complex. And so we saw an opportunity of integrating recycling attributes into Google Maps, into business profiles. And so this enables businesses to, whether you're Best Buy in the United States or a Home Depot, or a regular storefront, you can select drop off and start flagging for users what you accept. And so now you can search for battery recycling near me and get geo-specific relevant results on a billion user platform and be able to participate in the circular economy. So that addresses one of the barriers, right? Low awareness to drop off options. Here we are. And now we can also tap in more than 250 million local guides, people like you and me, that can go to these locations and in real time, while we're standing at the storefront, update the business profile and suggest an edit. And I think this is a really amazing example and innovation of a technology solution that can better help people engage in not just e-waste recycling, but recycling in a lot of different forms.
Now, you mentioned AI and machine learning earlier. Are the accelerators also going to be looking at companies that are doing physical processes like shredding in order to start to use the AI that can separate the waste stream into more valuable individual streams? The next step is to actually process it. Are you also investing in those kinds of companies?
Yes, we're looking at those. And in fact, just a couple of months ago, we launched a series of ML models to do exactly this type of thing that you described. We call it Circular Net. And this is, as I said, a series of ML models aimed at better improving the identification of recycled materials as they move down a conveyor belt in a recycling facility. And these models are now published on GitHub, available to everybody. So this lowers the barrier to entry for use of AI and ML. And our hope is that this not only catalyzes an improvement in revolution in the ability and the use of AI in recycling to do exactly as you had mentioned. Our hope is that people will take these models and build upon them. And as the applications just closed yesterday for all of the teams coming through the accelerator. And so now starts the tough process of going through the hundreds of entries and down selecting them into a group of companies that are really focused in on data, AI, ML, and other technology solutions for circular economy.
One of the potential solutions to the problem of getting consumers to recognize the value of the thing they have, it may be monetary value or just the environmental benefit of not throwing it away, is using product passports, actually characterizing a product, its materials, its recyclability, and so forth. Is Google looking at those kinds of options for its own products potentially? And would you be interested in supporting an industry-wide solution?
Well, we are working with the European Union exactly on this issue, where the Circular Economy Action Plan is rolling out digital product passports. We are also engaged in the digital product passport initiatives that are being worked through with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And we also today publish environmental reports on sustainability.google/reports for most, if not all, of our core products that list out things like carbon footprint, chemicals of concern, and material composition. So we already do a lot of this today, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how this evolves over time and the use cases and how this information gets leveraged.
Is there a particular work stream that people should be following in order to understand how that might evolve?
I could not recommend right now a specific work stream. In my experience, the European Union is really leading on a lot of this through policy initiatives and other industry associations in region. And so I would recommend to audiences that if they're interested in that, to engage some organizations locally over there.
Mike, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with us today. How can people keep up with what Google's doing? Because you're doing so much.
Thank you so much, Mitch. This has been wonderful. They can learn all about our progress towards sustainability and our commitments at sustainability.google.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it.
We've been talking with Mike Werner. He's the leader of Google's circular economy programs, and you can learn more, as he said, at sustainability.google. Yes, it doesn't need a .com, sustainability.google. The power of big tech companies to solve the challenge of decarbonization is potentially transformative, and Google's progress to date is inspiring. But we also heard clearly that now that the climate crisis is widely recognized, the real work of understanding all the waste we generate, the materials that are in circulation that can be recycled for use, and the potential for improved sorting and processing of all recyclables is just beginning. Google's Circular Economy Accelerator program is one of many efforts to jumpstart the kinds of revolutions in sustainable living that are going to be comparable to how radio, television, the automobile, the computer, smartphones, and wireless networks transformed our lives over the past century or so. It's easy to forget that our species just invented modern life 150 years ago and is still working out the bugs. The biggest bug, of course, is global warming from the fuels that created our modern world. So the efficiencies and circular networks that Mike described will work surprising and massive changes in life. So stay tuned to what Google's doing. I want to take a moment to humbly ask you to share this show or any of the more than 350 episodes of Sustainability in Your Ear with your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers. Show your boss. Let folks know that you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, and all the other fine purveyors of podcast goodness that you might use. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate the fact that you all are the amplifiers that get these ideas out there. More ideas means less waste. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.